We said we were going to talk about Skull Games a little bit.
You mentioned Flags of Valor earlier. One of my best friends now is when Flags of Valor was very early on in their. Well, we'll talk about it, but
You can start with Flags of Valor, and we can go into Skull Games.
yeah, kind of the giving back aspect of my life and so forth. Okay,
It's my responsibility to edit all of it.
okay,
I'll figure out the best way to do
that's fair. Okay, I think personally that having a heart for giving back is important. I saw in a local publication, I think it was like an Ashburn Gazette or something like that. I saw an ad for a relatively new company called Flags of Valor, and they were Ashburn based. And the advertisement was really cool. They're making these really awesome, what they would call wooden American wall art, right? Making these really cool custom wooden flags. And the first thing I thought was, well, I really want one of those, but I want to find out what they're all about because they're local. I do care about the military. Maybe this is a way I can see what they're doing and so forth. So I reached out to a guy. I got connected to a guy by the name of Mike Taylor. Mike is now a very close personal friend of mine. But at the time, Mike was the only non-veteran working at Flags of Valor, except for maybe their receptionist, I think. And Mike was kind of like running sales and business development for the company. Again, very early in their livelihood. Mike agreed to take a meeting and went out and saw their first Ashburn shop, tiny little shop. They're actually making flags there. And so I sat down with Mike and I said, "Tell me, what are the pillars of the organization? Like what's the foundation here? Why does Flags of Valor do what they do?" And he said, "It's very simple." He said, "We build beautiful, wooden, American themed flags, wall art. We call it wall art, right? We only use materials made in America, and the only people who can actually build the flags are combat veterans." I'm like taken back by that. I'm like, this is awesome. Like, so I said, let me get this right. You hire combat veterans so that you can make beautiful American-made wall art. I just think about Mike saying this. I can just hear him say this. He goes, "You got it all wrong." I'm like, I'm repeating what you just told me. Like, how do I have it wrong? He goes, "You just said that we hire combat veterans so that we can make beautiful wooden American wall art." He said, that's 1,000% wrong. We make beautiful wooden American wall art so that we can hire combat veterans. And I was like, I don't know if I was bawling, but I was like emotional. That's awesome. Like your purpose, your mission, Brian, who was the founder and CEO of the company, still is. Like that's like your purpose is clear, right? You have started this business to be able to employ, it does it, whatever the widget is. You're making flags, you're building chairs, you're making a microphone, whatever, right? What they make is awesome, but that didn't matter. At least to me, it didn't matter. And Mike almost kind of made me think like, it doesn't matter what we build. We want to turn a profit. We want to have a successful business, but we're doing it for this purpose. Mm-hmm. So Mike and another mutual friend of ours, Phil, the three of us are very close, started kind of working together to start doing different things, predominantly in the charity golf tournament world, to try to support nonprofits that we cared about. A couple of years ago, Mike got introduced to a guy by the name of Kevin Metcalf, who is very respected in the human trafficking world. And we had a couple conference calls and we met, had Zoom calls and so forth. And Mike and Phil and I said, listen, we want to put on a high-end charity golf tournament to raise money for your organization. And Kevin said, very honestly, which I fully respect, we don't have the resources. We're not ready for that kind of thing yet. But do you know Jeff Teagues? We said, no. I'm going to introduce you to Jeff Teagues. He's the founder and CEO of Skull Games. Well, that'd be great. So we got introduced to Jeff, eventually had lunch with Jeff and his team, Ty Canner, Joe Scaramucci, who are all like important, like they're head of law enforcement. They're at the time, certainly the main, players in the organization. Had lunch with them to find out a little bit more about what they do, what their passions are and so forth. And they're just an awesome organization. have clearly defined what it is they want to do, right? They are providing using open source intelligence and providing real, meaningful information and data to law enforcement to help in the fight against human trafficking. I didn't know, at the time, I didn't think that this was something that was going to be necessarily like hit a hot button with me, right? Make-A-Wish did it in a certain way, and the things that were important to Flags of Valor when we were doing that kind of stuff, it's all important stuff. But, I have 2 daughters, right? And I know one's 28, the other one's 19. But there's no age limit, right? And when you start to dig a little bit deeper and hear from people whose life is now dedicated to that war, and find out what's really going on to the degree that I can know that, right? And really find out what's going on in that horrible, horrible world. You start to get a little interested in seeing what you can do to help out, right? I'm not in law enforcement. I'm not, Jeff's a former, military badass, right? I mean, he's, Delta Force commander. He's seen it all on the battlefield. He is a, God-loving, God-fearing Christian. He's written an amazing book called Where Have All the Heroes Gone, which is a fantastic read if you haven't read it. It's a kind of an intercession of his faith and some biblical stories coupled with military stories and his experience and kind of how those things come together, which is pretty awesome. Brazilian black belt, right? I mean, he's done a lot. Not a guy I'm going to mess with, but is passionate about fighting this fight. And when you sit down, this is what's awesome about sitting down and meeting with people who do the kind of things that Jeff and his team do, is finding out about the human being, right? Finding out about the meaning and the purpose behind all this. And it's fascinating, right? It's horrible, but it's fascinating.
I was looking in the Protect Your Family course that they have. Jeff gave me a coupon code so I could watch it for free. There was the one story with Sarah Jane Vegas, which was, I don't know why that's not on YouTube. Like that would be it's a very like emotional story, and it was 30 minutes long, but it felt like 2 hours just because there's so much detail in her story. She was a survivor of of a sex trafficking. I don't know if it was a ring or just she was in that world in Europe, and it was a lot. Like I wasn't crying or anything, but like internally it was just a lot.
Tear you up.
It's a lot to take in. And throughout the entire course that I was watching, which you guys really need to get the audio better on that. the audio. Are
you talking to Skull Games?
Yeah, I'm talking to Skull Games. You guys need to get that audio better. Which isn't that hard to do. But other than that, the one thing that I kind of like a recurring message I heard throughout all the 8 courses that they have, 8 modules, is that there's no human side to human trafficking. Like they call it human trafficking. There's no humanity in that. There's no human. It's just a bunch of people who don't know how to be human, and it's
a business. It's a massive business with complete disregard to humanity whatsoever. And the whole premise, as I understand it, behind, I mean, their logo's badass. But the whole premise behind Skull Games is in their world there was a very well-known pimp, right? Basically that was known for saying, the world, our world of pimping and prostitution and trafficking and so forth is not about overtaking the physical body of somebody. It's about the mind, right? It's about, and it is a slow burn, right? It's a slow grind. Typically it's actually through technology, right? In many cases that they're getting a hold of these victims and slowly changing their mindset and slowly building trust, and
just a psychological grooming.
That's exactly what it is. And therein lies the name Skull Games.
It's not a sex game.
It's a skull game. Yeah.
The more I've like 1,000 questions I want to ask him. If when he comes out in June for the event, and it's kind of, on one hand, it's really admirable what they're doing, because I never heard about it. I knew that sex trafficking was a thing, but I'm almost 21. I don't know anything about sex trafficking. And then I read about the course, and now I just want to go into it. And on one hand, it's really cool what they're doing, but on the other hand, it kind of makes sense why not many people either want to listen about it or want to talk about it, because it's kind of like what we talked about before. When you're not really informed about something, it can be really scary. But at other time, when you know everything about it, it's like, what can I do about it? And some people, like, I've talked to a lot of people here at XCal about it, and they don't know what Skull Games is, or they don't know that there are organizations out there that are trying to do it. And I think in my opinion, based on what I've watched and what I've read from the various materials that they have, is that the biggest bottleneck that they have is, or one of the bottlenecks is, that they're using open source intelligence. They're using stuff that you can find publicly available information, because that's what law enforcement can use. Like the probable cause part of law enforcement is that you need probable cause. You can't use stuff that have to be like illegally obtained information, because that won't hold up in court. And that's a really hard part. It's finding that stuff that's publicly available on channels that are easy to access, because there'll be private, like, Facebook groups. There might be private like Snapchat stories or something like that. Stuff that's like, you can't do it unless you're in that circle.
Part, I think, of the challenge forget about a global perspective, just a national perspective, is, what the first part about solving a problem is being able to identify that you have one, right? So I think the problem, until it continues to be, until there's a greater sense of urgency presented with it on a national scale, most people either don't know about it, ignore it. It's not a priority for them. It's not in their backyard, but yet it is in their backyard, because there's a massive, the greatest percentage and increase of trafficking is happening here in the United States, right? So one of the things that I'm really hopeful that they create, to whatever degree we're able to help them, in the smallest way possible, is creating awareness, right? One of the things that we'll be doing in June, coupled with the event that's happening here at XCal, which is pretty awesome, and people get to come and pew and shoot a bunch of fun stuff and all that, and get some self-defense training from Dave, and this will be our 4th year here, which is pretty awesome. But there's going to be an extra piece of that, which is going to be a situational awareness training. Capacity and their ability to do this in the field is limited, right? But our goal is to take even up to 24 young, girls of teenage years and so forth in the field, right? And there's so much that I'm really, I think, in a way, kind of excited that Skull Games will help communities start to understand, is, what should I do if I see ... right? What should I be on the look? Our day-to-day stuff, like, we pull up at the gas station and fill up our tank and don't pay attention to our surroundings, right? We could be in the grocery store. We could be at the ATM machine. There are things happening that we don't even know are happening right next to us. There's
also that one, I don't know if it was a quote or just a phrase, out of sight, out of mind. If you don't see it, you don't know it exists. It's not like you can see someone being a professional, like a jiu-jitsu black belt. You can see them in action on the TV, but seeing it in front of you is a whole different experience. And it's funny how, like, Ashburn, as rich as it is with all the amount of people, like, Loudoun County is one of the richest counties in the country. It wouldn't be that hard for someone to do a drug deal here, out in the open. Just have a decent looking car, don't dress funny, and you could do a drug deal in the parking lot of a neighborhood and no one would bat an eye.
There's no question it's happening. We also live in a time when you talk about out of sight, out of mind, right? There's a lot of reasons why we don't get involved in things. It hasn't impacted me personally, right? Where some of the greatest impacts in the nonprofit world have happened because people started to raise money and awareness because something happened to them personally, right? To their family. So hasn't happened to me personally. I don't have time. I don't have the energy. I'm lazy. Whatever the case might be. It's just sheer purposeful ignorance. And I say that because there's a difference between ignorance and purposeful ignorance. Ignorance is just a lack of understanding. Purposeful ignorance is, I am going to almost go out of my way to ignore it, right? Because I don't want to hear about it. Because if I hear about it, yeah, I'm gonna feel sad about it. I'm gonna feel sad about this story. I'm gonna feel sad about what have you, and then I'm going to take zero action. You know, and listen, that's not everybody has the ability to give one or more of what we call the 3 T's, right? Time, talent, and treasure, right? If all you want to do is write a damn check, right? If you have time to give and serve on a board or get on the highway and pick up trash, right? Or whatever the case might be, fine, right? If you have a gift, right? I mean, I know there are people that are, musicians that go to Children's Hospital and play for kids in the whatever. Just give something, right? And we just certainly here, right? How do we not have the ability? How do most people here not have the ability to do at least one, if not 2 of the 3?
The opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. The opposite of attention is not lack of attention, it's avoidance. If you avoid something, you put your attention towards it, but you're intentionally not putting your attention on it. And there's also the situations where people don't have the time for it. They have a family to raise, they have things to do, they have things out of their balance. And that's kind of going back to what we said earlier about, if I can make my life so efficient or so productive that I can do things outside of, if I'm able to get this up and running to a point where I have multiple editors, where I have people who can do the work for me, that I just have to do the production, and then I can do other things that I find valuable, then it's like you get, the more and more you learn, the more and more you become more efficient, make your life better. You can help other people be better, but in my mind, I have to make my life better first.
Sure. And
then from there, I'll have the money, I'll have maybe the influence. I don't really care about that, but I'll have more resources behind what I'm doing, so that it's not that I can just give my time. I can give my time, my resources, my attention, and hopefully at that point, my expertise in whatever I know, that it's not just I could do something now really well. Like, I can help Skull Games. I can do what I can, or if I wait a little bit longer, I can give them more.
Yeah, but what you're doing now is helping them, right? If 5,000 people watch this interview, right, that's helping them. It doesn't have to be a direct impact.
Yeah, I can do the most with what I've got.
No question. To your point about improving yourself or being the best version of yourself before you try to help others. It's why they tell you to put on your own oxygen mask in the plane before you put on somebody else's, right? I mean, I agree that we're not going to be perfect, right? I'm not sure that we need to get to a certain point before we make a point to try to help. I think there should be some component of the makeup of you, not just you, I'm saying you as the general, right? That should have a heart for giving back, right? And people don't know where to start, right? They may not have identified something that's a passion for them, right? They may not have they may not have taken the step to reach out to an organization and say, who can I meet with to tell me about what you do? And guess what? If that doesn't resonate, move on to the next one. Don't give up and just say, okay, well, I reached out to Jeff and we had a meeting, and you know what I mean? Because if Skull Games didn't resonate, there's kind of that, to me, this both the spiritual thing and kind of that kinesthetic thing I was talking about learning about how Skull Games operates. When I left that lunch, it meant something to me, and it also meant something to the people, my close friends, who are also, we're collectively looking like, what can we get into next? What can we get into next? Do it with someone, right? You're so much more likely to jump into something. Even if it's at your local church and you're just going to fill boxes of food, right? Just go do it, and do it with a group.
So I'll probably rephrase what I was saying earlier. Instead of give whatever value you can give now, yes. the most effective, most efficient value that you can now without hurting yourself in the process. Like, if you can go to your church and you can help out and it doesn't take, and it's like 2 hours of your time, and you're not already doing anything that day. Not only is that helping them, but it's also helping you because your mind will now be tuned to being more productive during that time.
Let me give you another example.
Yeah.
It's Christmas time, right? And you realize that, okay, I don't know who to help, where to help, but I know there are probably families in this area who can't afford to do anything for their family for Christmas. Okay. So, what could I afford to spend? 'Cause I just don't want to write a $50 check or a $100 check to a local organization and hope that they make a difference. Right. But maybe some of these local organizations, your local churches, the whoever, right? The food bank, there are a lot of really good local nonprofits who are helping families in need. Maybe there are families in the area who've reached out directly to those organizations and said, listen, I can't celebrate Christmas with my family this year, and here's what I need, right? Pajamas, socks, right? Not like Xboxes or things like that, but I mean, can I not go out to lunch twice this month maybe and go buy a bunch of things for a family who have clearly indicated what they need, and bring it to that organ? Sure, I can. Right? I mean, so I say all that because it doesn't have. We often confuse or make the mistake of determining what value or something meaningful might be to someone else because of what we deem meaningful. We have everything, right? I would never ask somebody for a pair of pajamas. I'll just go out and buy a pair of pajamas, right? But you have to take that step, because it's amazing what you'll find if you actually look.
I think there's one saying: if you're spending money on yourself, then you're going to be very frugal. If you spend money on other people, then you're going to be more generous. If you're spending someone else's money on yourself, you're going to be more generous. And then if you're spending other people's money on other people, you have a government. Obviously not going to go into like the political side of things, but it's funny how much kind of like what we started with, like you can get a lot of happiness, a lot of joy from helping other people, so long as you're not hurting yourself in the process. And
it feels different. If I buy something for my kids at Christmas, there's a temporary happiness of them opening a present and go, oh, that's what I wanted. You know what I mean? When you give to people in need and know that you've made an impact that way, there's that happiness and joy comparison again. It's a different feeling, right? And honestly, I don't know why I don't do it every day, because it is an unparalleled feeling, right? It's something
that I do whenever I'm like looking for a present to give to someone. I don't just try to find a present. Try to find something that matches who they are. So like I might get like a friend of mine. She likes golf. Now I was at the Virginia Museum of Art, and I was just looking around to see what they have, and I saw this one golf thing, and I was like, hey, she might like that, because it's like this will be something that would be relevant to what they do. So it's not just providing something, it's providing maybe some value over time, that every time they see it, they'll go back to it. Like let's say I got a pen, I could get 1,000 of the same cheap pens, or I can get something that may be a little bit different, that like every time I use it, it's just like a little fun to play around with. Something that's like, it's not just the present, it's not just the act of giving, it's giving value.
The key is giving without any expectation of anything in return, right? I hope, well, in the sense of like buying gifts anonymously and giving them to, a family in need, I hope they don't know who I am. I'm giving because I want them to have it, right? In the business world, it's a little bit different, because I want, if I give something with my logo on it, you give them that because you want them to think of you every time that they use it, right? So it's a little different, but that's really in terms of the things that we want to do to help an organization like Skull Games, is giving without expectation, right? It's just what can we do to help you take your organization to the next level? Because what you're doing is changing lives, saving lives, right? That's purposeful.
They find the people in need, they help them rehabilitation, or they help them get their life
back to normal society, really.
And then some of them turn into hunters, into people hunting the predators, and that's the fascinating part. It's like you take someone who was a victim and then they get and build the courage so they can start doing the same thing for, and the best part is that, well, I don't know if it's the best part, but one aspect to that is that they, with that knowledge of all the small little things that they might not want to tell anyone, because you have three different people. You have everyone has like the public self, the private self, and the core self. The public self is the one that they show to everyone. The private self is they show to close friends or family, and the core self is the one they don't show to anyone else. And it's funny, like, it maybe, I don't know if like underscores it, but just the ability to have all those memories, all those different things that hurt them. Now they can identify that when they're doing that public, the open source intelligence.
How brilliant is that? Who is more likely to give 1,000% of themselves to help the next person not be trafficked than someone who was, right? I mean, when you've been through something horrific or something, even just think like, if I didn't know where my next meal was coming from and I was fed, how much more encouraged am I going to be having known that feeling to help keep somebody else from being hungry? I mean, that's brilliant.
Yeah. It's like one of the things my dad always reference is that I won't ever really appreciate everything that I have because I grew up with running water. I grew up with an oven in the kitchen with a refrigerator. I can put ice cream in there and eat it whenever I want. Well, not whenever I want, but
You probably can.
I probably could have. But it's hard to really appreciate and have the gratitude of everything around me if I haven't experienced what it's like to have nothing.
Yeah, that's right.
I think a lot of the self-made millionaires and billionaires, the people who really made a lot of money, came from not so wealthy beginnings. Like don't quote me on it, but like 5% of all the self-made millionaires actually got it from like inheritance.
Yeah, because you know what? Well, yeah, you know why the other 95% were successful? Because they weren't afraid to fail, right? They had nothing to. They didn't come from something so cushy, right? And you know that they couldn't. They had nothing to give up. You know, they might have invested a little bit of money to take the next step, but their experience was, I have nothing to lose.
Not the most fun thing to think about, that every day you have to live it with knowing that you have to be uncomfortable.
True, but I think what we're missing, especially around here, like we don't have to give anything up meaningful. All the wonderful things we have and the comfortable lives we live and the ice cream in the fridge every day and all that kind of, we don't have to give any of that stuff up to make a difference to somebody else. We just have to be willing to seek it out.